All right, let's start. Maybe let's put on our class that we are starting. Starting now. All right. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'nasan Banu Es Taraso Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So today was the 34th passing, the yard site of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's daughter and the current Rebbe's wife. So I wanted to share a picture. Yeah. This is.
Yeah, because then if you exit out.
Okay, no, just know this.
No, this is what they see.
Okay.
Now they see this whole screen. It's confusing them.
What?
They see whatever you see right now. Unless you stop. Look, stop sharing. Now they don't.
Okay.
Now they don't see anything.
Somehow I do share screen. It works.
Yeah, you want to share screen?
Okay, yeah, we
Okay,
just
exactly. No, they don't see it now.
all right, let's try one more time. Share screen.
Push this one.
Share.
Now they're seeing all this.
No, they're just seeing this. Just seeing this.
They only see it in the corner then.
This is share screen. Anyway, this is the Rebbitzin. And it's today is her 34th anniversary of her passing. And I wanted to speak a little bit about the Rebbitzin, a little bit about how the Rebbe explains the significance of the day, and a little bit about the specialness of the Rebbitzin and some stories about her as well. So when the Rebbitzin passed away, this was in 1988, and I was in Crown Heights in 1988. So I was, very feeling and involved in what was going on. And of course, I knew it was something very big, but I didn't know what that big thing was. Like, I knew it was something, but I didn't know what it was, as none of us did, of course, besides the Rebbe. We just knew of the great loss and of the greatness. And there was someone went by the Rebbe, I don't remember, like the comptroller of New York, or some such politician who was speaking to the Rebbe in English and said, oh, heard she was a very, very wonderful woman. And the Rebbe said, in my opinion, that is an understatement. And only God Almighty knows how truly special she was. So that was the esteem the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, held his wife, the Rebbitzin, in. It's an understatement to say she was a very, very wonderful woman. 4 years later, on the anniversary of her passing on the yard site, the Rebbe spoke in length and a lot of depth, and I'm just going to give a very, very, very brief synopsis of the, I'm not even going to touch on most of the concepts, but just very briefly, the Rebbe explained that the passing of the Rebbitzin was the final demarcation line in bringing Mashiach. For lots and lots and lots of reasons I'm not going to touch on. And after the Rebbe explained at great depth and length, all of the spiritual dynamics going on behind the scenes, so to speak, we come back to sort of like the basic question. Okay, that's amazing, that's cool, that's great, that's awesome. But why was it the passing of Rebbe Chaim Mushka? Well, she was like the female version of Rebbe. She was the daughter in this entire discourse. The Rebbe never mentions that it was his wife he's talking about. It's always the daughter of the previous Rebbe. Now, for those of you that have sons, tune in, and daughters, according to the Talmud, and explained at length in Hasidic thought, really based on a verse, a pasuk in the Torah, Tazria Mitzvah. A son has a special relationship to a mother, and a daughter has a special relationship to a father. You might or might not see that in the relationship between your sons and your daughters and you and your husbands, but this is the truth. There is a special deep bond between a son and a mother, and between a daughter and a father. And as such, as the daughter of the previous Rebbe did not have any sons, Rebbe Chaim Moshe had a very deep bond, and in a practical way, she was very close to him and was educated by him personally, and truly was like the female version of Rebbe. So the passing of a Rebbe brought Mashiach, and it was the female Rebbe. Why? Well, because women are the ones that are bringing Mashiach. As we're learning, as we're discussing, it says that the Jews left Egypt by the merit of the women. And it says the future redemption will be like the redemption from Egypt. So then we took the men out, and now we're taking the men out as well. And it says in every generation, every redemption comes through the women. And the Arizal says that our generation, or the generation of redemption, aka our generation, is a reincarnation of the generation that left Egypt. It's also a generation of the Tower of Babel, of Babylonia. It's also a reincarnation of the generation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, of Meron fame. So we were around by the Babylonian Tower. We were around by Egypt and the desert. We were around by Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and we came back because we're the ones that bring redemption. We've done it before, we're doing it again. So a woman brings redemption. And that's why the female version of Rebbe, so to speak, Rebbe Chaim Mushka, her passing, because the passing is like the climax of the career of a very, very holy person. Her passing brought redemption. But then the question is, okay, that's beautiful, and we accept it as true, and we've heard it many times, but why is it true? Why is it that the passing of a woman is bringing redemption? Why are women the ones bringing redemption? So there's a general answer for that, which we touched on in the talk we're learning, which is that women embody God's sovereignty. And since sovereignty will be dominant by the redemption, those that embody sovereignty, us, are the key players in bringing redemption. Now here, the Rebbe develops something else as well. And the Rebbe says, because the redemption means that God finally has a home, that this world is God's home. That's what he wants. That's why he created us 5,782 years ago. And men can also create a home for God. But what women can do is make it beautiful, because women have a special feeling for beauty. And as women beautifully serve God, they give God a beautiful home. And a beautiful home is very significant because beauty enhances, beauty broadens. So when we give God a beautiful home, we literally expand, so to speak, the consciousness of God himself in two ways: from the perspective of this world and from the perspective of God. From the perspective of this world, as this world was, as God created it, this world cannot contain God's essence in a revealed fashion. It would like self-destruct. But the redemption means, Mashiach means, God's here completely, in essence, and revealed and permanent, and the world handles it. So how does that work? Our beautiful service of God broadens the godly fabric of this world, like stretching it, extending it, and enabling it to contain God's essence and handle the process. So that's how we're broadening God by our beautiful service. And additionally, we're literally changing God himself. That literally energies that were embedded within God and never expressed, never exposed, never revealed, are coming out because of the beautiful home we're fashioning for him, because of our beautiful service. So what does it mean, a beautiful service? So in the talk, the Rebbe basically seems to be pointing out 3 ideas of what it means to have a beautiful service of God. A beautiful service is a beautiful service spiritually, physically, and emotionally. If we take example of lighting the candles of the Shabbos. So we beautify the Shabbos candles physically by having a clean home, a beautiful clean white tablecloth on the table, polished candlesticks. We are ready and don't look like we just were like, frazzled. We look ready and the table looks ready and the room looks ready and the house looks ready. The table's set. It's set beautifully, silver, china, glass. We have a beautiful home welcoming in the Shabbos as we light the Shabbos candles. That's how we're beautifully enhancing our commandment. Now, if you do none of the above and you light the Shabbos candles, you still did the mitzvah, full points. But if your table is with this beautiful white tablecloth and beautiful polished candlesticks and silver and china and glass and pretty napkins and a clean room and a clean house, it's like you're beautifying the commandment. That's how we physically make something beautiful, make a service of God beautiful. We can also make God's service beautiful spiritually. So how do we spiritually beautify lighting Shabbos candles? We light early. We give charity before we light. We take time after we light to talk to God. It's the best time of the week for God to hear the voice of the woman. So we're spiritually beautifying the commandment. We're not just like, we're like giving the charity, lighting early, praying sincerely. We're making it spiritually a beautiful commandment. And how do we beautify it emotionally? Because we really invested with our feelings. It's not like, okay, I cleaned and I cooked and I made my hot plate or my blech and now I'm lighting my candles and then I'm gonna just collapse. We take time to feel what's going on, to invest the current situation with the current service, with our feeling of like, wow, I'm welcoming the Shabbos. And it's right now entering my home. So I give feeling to what I'm doing. And that's a forte of women, to give feeling. Froma, do you have a question?
Yeah. Why is it that Fridays are always like such a energy? You know what I mean? Like you're like in a rush and like everything feels stressed and
it could be because it's so important to the other. It's like whatever's very important, your evil inclination is going to sort of target. And Shabbos, and especially, of course, the Jewish woman lighting Shabbos candles and lighting Shabbos candles beautifully and lighting Shabbos elegantly and dignified and with all that feeling is super important. So that's why God makes you crazy stressed right before. It's sort of like it's the most important time of the week, Friday night, for husband and wife to be together, because that is mirroring and creating above God's masculine and feminine elements to fuse. So therefore, it's the day of the week that God's going to make sure there's extra tension and stress between the husband and the wife. It's going to be where there's going to be the challenge of overcoming that and not being pulled by that and being close. So that's how it works. It's important and it's difficult. So what I do for myself, if I want to light 10 minutes early, I tell myself the time 15 minutes early. So then I have somewhat of a hope of making it for 10. But if I tell myself 5 and I want to light at 5, I'm doomed. But I tell myself 4:55 and I want to light at 5, there's more aspiration that I'll make it. And I found whatever time you tell yourself, that's the time. It doesn't make a difference really. So you can always light early. Just tell yourself that's the time. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't make a difference. Whatever time Shabbos comes in, you're not going to be ready. So you could just say, okay, Shabbos is coming in instead of 4:30, say 4:15. All right, fine. So you're aiming for 4:15. And then hopefully you'll make it by 4:20 and you'll be 10 minutes early. And that's very, very beautiful. I remember once, many years ago, my school, they took on a resolution, a joint resolution. That was a very inspired moment. And I wasn't around then. If I had been there, I think I would have dissuaded them. But they took on this joint resolution that everyone's going to light candles 10 minutes early. And I was like, just those minutes gone from the gathering. I came back, I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are crazy. 10 minutes early. I strive for on time, and that's difficult. But I felt, okay, if this was the decision, I'm going to be a part of it. And it's so special, and a Jewish woman, and lighting the candles early. And this is like bringing the redemption, and we're bringing the redemption early. And it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. It's just a little stressful. And I said, okay, I'm going to try. And guess what? I found it's no more difficult than lighting candles on time. It's just whatever time you tell yourself, that's what you got to deal with. So it is a very, very, very special thing. And it's a way to truly beautify the commandments. Now, I was just giving an example with the Shabbos candles. I mean, you could apply what I said to any other commandments as well. There's the component of the physical beauty. There's a component of the spiritual beauty. And there's a component of the emotional beauty. And these are the ways that we create for God, not just a home in this world, but a beautiful home, a stunning home, gorgeous home. And our gorgeous home allows God to be expansive in creation, allows God's self to expand and express in ways never did before. And that's why women are the catalyst to bringing the redemption. And that's why a woman's passing, again, because in the very, very, very holy, the passing symbolizes like the culmination of their energies. That's why a woman's passing is what brought in the redemption, and not a man's. And that was the energy of today, of the 22nd of Shvat. 22nd is 11 plus 11. And 11 symbolizes God's essence energies. So 11 plus 11 means like, whoa, essence beyond essence. It's a very blessed day. We're told it's a day of blessings. 22 in Hebrew is Chaf Beis, which is the letters of the word Becha, which thereby connects to the verse, Becha Yivorach Yisrael. In you, the Jewish people will be blessed. So this is the day to draw down blessings for the Jewish people. So focus, this is the time, this is the day. It's a woman's day, and it's a day to bring blessings. So I'll just share a little bit about Reb Chaim Mushka. I mean, there's so many stories I could share. I'll just share a few. A girl I know, I mean, she's like my age. Her name then was Chaya Lu, now it's Chaya Posner. She's married. And her family had a very unique relationship with the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin was a very, very, very private person. I never saw her. My husband, whatever, Ashkacha Prachas happened to hear her voice once. Maybe saw her once. I never. She's very private. But then she did have very deep relationships to those people she had relationships with. So one of those people happened to be this girl, what I'm saying was my age. And at the time, she was probably, the time of the story occurred, she was like 18. Her grandfather was very close to the Rebbetzin, and the Rebbe very close to the Rebbetzin. And through her grandfather, she had been several times to the Rebbetzins' house and visit with the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin was always, every story, everyone says like the same thing. Very gracious, very royal, very dignified, very sensitive, an amazing listener. You felt she actually cared. Usually when you talk, the other person just wants to respond. Here she was really, truly listening and really, really hearing you. These were the common themes everyone that had a relationship with Rebbetzin would say. So I guess that was so a hallmark trait of hers, her understanding of people and her sensitivity and genuine concern for people. So this girl, Chaya, she just graduated high school in England. She's from London. And she was spending the year studying in New York, in Crown Heights, in Brooklyn. She was going to what we call seminary, which is like a post-high school program. Now, her whole family lives in England. She comes, she's in New York, and she'd already started the year, and she went with her grandparents when her grandparents went by the Sukkot holiday and they visited the Rebbe, and she went as well. And her grandparents said, oh, look, Chaya is now going to be in your neighborhood. Chaya, that's the girl's name. She's going to be in New York for the year. And the Rebbetzin smiled and she was like, oh, like, I don't remember exactly the words, but something to the effect of like, oh, we're going to be neighbors. And if you ever need anything, let me know. And Chaya is thinking, if I need something, I'm going to call Rebbetzin, the Lubavitcher Rebbetzin, and tell her like, oh, this is what I need. Like, not exactly. Okay. Please, the Rebbetzin said, call me anytime. And of course, Chaya never called the Rebbetzin. A while later, her sister, Chaya's older sister, was getting married in England. Now, obviously in those days, much, much more so than today, you don't just like hop on a plane and fly from New York to England. So she, obviously no question, wasn't going to the wedding. It was a little, sad, but whatever, that's life. And then she spoke to her grandparents, I think on the day of the wedding. She called, she wished, she wasn't speaking too much either. Transatlantic calls were quite expensive in those days. But she called to wish everyone mazel tov. Her grandparents got on the phone and her grandfather said, the Rebbetzin trying to reach you. She's like, the Rebbetzin trying to reach me? She said, yeah, we spoke to the Rebbetzin. She said, she's trying to reach you. Call her. So, okay, whatever. There's a lot of details in the story. I'm not going to say all the details, but Chaya called and then the Rebbetzin called back and then she went over there and they had a very lovely visit and she continued personally visiting her throughout her time in New York. The point of the story, though, is she wondered, why did the Rebbetzin suddenly reach out to her? And she asked the Rebbetzin, like, why'd you reach out to me? And the Rebbetzin said, well, I knew your sister was engaged. I knew your sister was getting married. And I understood it must be painful for you to be so far from your family at such a special time. So I wanted to reach out to be there for you. And it was so special to Chaya. Of course, again, putting in perspective, this is a little nobody 18-year-old girl. This is the wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, this very, royalty. And she was thinking about someone else and just totally focusing on this girl's needs, this young, unimportant girl's needs. And it's, again, this is just one story. I can tell you hundreds. But they also express the same point. And Chaya said for herself, she's always held that very dear in her heart, that concept of you just put the other person in front of yourself. Like the Rebbetzin didn't invite Chaya because the Rebbetzin needed Chaya, because the Rebbetzin had an interest, so to speak, in Chaya, because the Rebbetzin was gaining by Chaya coming and visiting her. The Rebbetzin reached out to Chaya because the Rebbetzin knew Chaya needed her. And Chaya herself, who's a shlucha now, says her whole life on shluchos, she always thinks of that mantra. Whatever you're doing, don't do it for yourself because of your needs, because of what's good for you. Truly think of the other person. What do they need? What can I do to help them? And that was just her personal experience. And again, there are hundreds and all sort of similar in that same train of just that sensitivity, that thoughtfulness, that care. Whenever a visitor came, though she's royalty, she always treated them like royalty. And the table's always set with the china and the glassware and the silver. And everything is very, we would say European, very, very elegant, very, very cultured, and very, very focused on making the other person feel good. There's many, many other stories. I'm thinking of so many stories, but there are many, many stories that express this point. On a different vein, of course, the Rebbetzin was also a very strong woman who went through so much, very wise woman, very, very, very intelligent, and had a lot of strength of character. And again, there are many stories that demonstrate this. So just one is the Rebbe and Rebbetzin, they got married. Well, a famous one, just a small little one, is when in 1927, when her father was arrested, now the NKVD came into their apartment. And at that time, she was engaged to the Rebbe, but he didn't happen to be in the apartment when they came. So, but she knew that he's probably going to come by to visit. So she was waiting on the outside porch. And when she saw that he was coming, she called out to him, "We have guests in the house." And right away he understood who these guests were. And he understood, why is she telling him we have guests in the house? What was the code that she was transmitting in those words is quickly run to the people that have incriminating documents and get rid of them, because we have the guests and they're going to be the next stop. All of that, just imagine, it's a little nothing. I wasn't even planning on sharing it. A little nothing, but imagine the presence of mind and the strength of character to when you have all this pressure and the NKVD is swarming over your house and ripping everything apart and doing everything they can to create fear. That was obviously part of their function, as well as to gather all this incriminating evidence of the crimes of her father, the Rebbe, in spreading Judaism in Russia. And what was her thought? What was she already thinking? Like, very clear-headed calculating, well, my fiance is going to come. If I can get him a message before he comes, and I have to word it carefully, and I'm going to give him a message that I can figure out and he's going to figure out, which of course, when the Rebbe heard it, the Rebbe understood the code and quickly ran to the secretary of the Rebbe, meaning the previous Rebbe, and very quickly they shredded every document they could find. There was no point in trying to hide anything. That wouldn't work, but they shredded everything so that, burnt, got rid of everything, so that when the NKVD came, which they did as soon as they finished with the Rebbe Rayatzis, with the previous Rebbe's apartment, they did come to his secretary. There was nothing there. Another little example of the same quality of hers, her strength. So it was a very lengthy engagement because there was a lot of persecution of the communists, and then they were in Riga, and then they got married in Warsaw. And then the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, sent his son-in-law, the current Rebbe, and his daughter to Berlin to study in the university there. And then as the Nazis gained power, the Rebbe and Rebbetzin, our Rebbe and Rebbetzin, traveled to Paris, where he continued his studies in the Sorbonne, in the university in Paris. So they're in Paris. Paris at this time, France has not yet been taken, but Germany is Nazi territory. And then the Rebbe's brother, Rabbi Yisrael Aryeh Leib, needed documents to travel. I don't remember if he was traveling from Russia to Israel or from Israel to England at that time, but he needed documents and they were in Berlin. Maybe the documents he needed had to do with his degrees. I don't remember, to be honest. I did try to look up the story before, and I know where it is, but I happen to be looking at a different book I have of wrong one, a collection of many stories of the Rebbetzin, and it's in another book. I know where it is. I just didn't get to it. Didn't get to the right book because I got distracted by the stories in that book. So, so the Rebbe was going to go to Paris, was going to go to Berlin. He said, okay, I'll go for my brother. I'm going to go to Berlin. And going to Berlin meant going to the headquarters of these documents, which was Nazi headquarters, because everything there was Nazi headquarters. And I need to ask them, I need to get these documents for my brother. So again, either so we could travel or he could show proof of his degree, something along those lines. I don't remember exactly now. I think it was traveling, but I don't want to say. And the Rebbetzin said to the Rebbe, no, you can't go to Berlin now. You look so obviously Jewish. Every Jew is a target. I'll go. A woman, don't look per se Jewish. So nobody will realize I'm Jewish. So it'll be easier for me. So the Rebbe agreed. So here's the Rebbetzin, traveling to Berlin, traveling to the place that the Nazis are already controlling and doing what they were doing to Jews already in Germany. At that point, they hadn't extended past Germany, but they were already doing this in Germany. And she goes, not only was she in Germany, in Berlin, she went to a Nazi headquarters to ask for this paperwork or documents for her brother-in-law. So what happens? She goes and they say, what's your name? So she had to say her name, and she had to, she couldn't think that she's not Jewish. She said, Chaim Mushka Schneerson. I said, that's your married name or your maiden name? She said, both. My maiden name was Chaim Mushka Schneerson, and my married name is Chaim Mushka Schneerson. Okay, what's your father's name? Also Schneerson. What was your mother's married name? Also Schneerson. What's your father-in-law's married? Everywhere they turned, it was Schneerson, because this was all cousins and all related, and everyone's last name was Schneerson. And the Nazi that she was dealing with got so mad at her, like the impudence of this Jew that can dare walk into these headquarters, can dare ask for these records, and is obviously lying through her teeth because she keeps saying the same last name. So obviously this is a, story, and it's a very implausible story. And she keeps insisting, yeah, we're all Schneersons. And where does she live currently? Obviously, he knew she wasn't in Germany, because if she was in Germany, she wouldn't be able to be walking the streets like this now. And she said she lives in France. And what's your address? She gave him the address. He said, just you wait. We're going to get Paris, and I'm marking your address. I'm marking your address. And she was unfazed. She got the paperwork she needed, and she went back to Paris, and they delivered it to her brother-in-law, that he was able to do what he needed to do with those papers. So again, just the enormous strength and character. And again, many other stories bring out the same point. And just a final idea that is also not always so focused on, but so true, was that she was also a very, very religious person. She was very sensitive and regal and understanding of people. She was very intelligent and strong, and she was very religious. And just again, a tiny little story that expresses this. This was right during the Nazi occupation. This was during the Nazi occupation of France. The Rebbe and Rebbetzin were in Paris when the Nazis occupied Paris. They were actually still in Paris when the Nazis were there, because the Nazis came to their address. They managed to flee and went to southern France, which was no haven for Jews at all, unfortunately. And they actually got out on the last boat. The last boat that traveled from Europe to America, they were on. They were supposed to be on the boat before that, which is incredibly hard to find tickets and get like everybody, those were gold. And they had tickets, and they got a telegram from the previous Rebbe, do not go on this boat. And they gave up their tickets. They said, we're not going. And everyone's like, you're crazy. I mean, you're crazy. Look what the Nazis are doing. You've got to go on this boat. And they're like, the Rebbe said not to go. We're not going. And that boat unfortunately was torpedoed. And they went on the last boat. So this is when they were still in France. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe needed a very large sum of money, $35,000, in those days, an astronomical fortune, which somehow he had gotten to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe had to send it to him in increments of 5,000 to New York, which was like, unheard of in those days. It was an enormous amount of money. And the Rebbe had an associate of his, a Jew, a religious Jew, who had a big business dealing. And through this Jew, he would give him 5,000. And whenever they got a telegram from the Rebbe, they would send the 5,000. Then he would give the Jew another 5,000, and we got a telegram. And that's how they sent, piece by piece, all 35,000. Legal. The Rebbe wanted to make sure it was done completely legal to send this money. So at one point, this man relates, he had wired 5,000. So he went to the Rebbe's house to get the next 5,000. And when he came, the Rebbe wasn't home. And the Rebbe knew what he was coming for, and she knew she was supposed to give him $5,000, which again was a huge amount of money in those days, a tremendous amount. So she closed the door, which he understood. Obviously, you closed the door, and this is private business. And then she went to her windows, which were like doors. They were like completely glass doors, and she opened them. So she closes the door of her apartment, and she opens like the windows that are in essence doors as well. And he says to her, why are you opening the windows? It's a very cold day. And she said to him, because of the laws of yichud. Yichud means that a man and a woman can't be secluded together. But there are various ways you could get around it. Now, one of the ways already existed. Her husband, she's married, and her husband, the Rebbe, was in the city. So if you're ever alone with a man and your husband's in the city, it's okay. That already is a permission. But that's a weak permission. A much better permission is to keep the door open, or to keep the windows open so anyone from outside can see what's happening. So she had to close her front door, but she went and not only exposed the windows, she literally opened them as doors. So there shouldn't be any question of any slight deviation from the law. Meaning if she didn't do this, she would still have been okay. But she wanted to be and was very, very scrupulous in following the law. And again, there's many other vignettes that bring out this point. So just that was a very small little sampling of a very, very powerful and very, very discreet woman. And yet the little bit we know about her is, there's a lot to think about in those stories, a lot to think about in her character, and a lot to think about what her passing gave us, which is, the Rebbe said, her whole life was giving the Rebbe to the world. And in her passing, in bringing the final stage and bringing the redemption. Any thoughts, any questions, any reflections on any of this? Okay, so let's continue and conclude what we're doing. I didn't think it was going to take us 3 times, but that's fine. We are learning a talk that we began 2 weeks ago. This is our 3rd week. And this talk, very appropriate for tonight. I think we started in connection to the passing of her father. Very, very appropriate on the night of Rebbe Chaim Mushka's yahrzeit, is all about the power of women. The power of women, the power of women in bringing specifically the redemption. And if you remember, we discussed last week, we overviewed this idea. Women, we are the most special, we know that. We were there first, we were there better. The giving of the Torah, the dedication of the tabernacle, also true going into Israel, though the Rebbe doesn't say that in this talk, but he says it in other talks. We discussed how women are the ones that bring the redemption, as we also just mentioned now, connected to Rebbe Chaim Mushka. We spoke about how women have the energy of redemption, and that's why we're the ones bringing the redemption. We connected this to the Torah portion of Bo, the previous Rebbe giving up his life, dying to bring the redemption, and how that connects to women and lighting the Shabbos candles. And then we connected it to Beshalach, to the Torah portion of the splitting of the sea. And we explained at length why the song of the women, led by Miriam, was more special than the men's song, though theirs was like 18 verses and ours was 1, because we had the tambourines, we had the dance, and this all expressed our greater belief, greater pain in exile, and greater joy in redemption and readiness, because we knew it was happening. And then we said that we see that the song of the woman was a pivotal song because the Haftorah, the portion of the prophets chosen to reflect the Torah, is a woman's song. It's Devorah's song. And we said that really relates to the energy of exile, because Haftorah is because there was a time when we couldn't read the Torah, and that's why we're reading this instead. So this is really the exile Torah portion, and it's a woman's song, Devorah's song. And that was as far as we got. So now we're going to continue, and even though we only have 20 minutes, I think we're going to push and finish today. So the Rebbe speaks about Devorah. And I thought this was relevant. It's very practical. Now let me give you a little background. Who is this Devorah? At this time, as you might remember, because we did some Jewish history together, the leaders of the Jews were judges. This was before the time of the kings. The first king was Saul. Hasn't happened yet. After that, David, nowhere near there. We're in the time of the judges. And very interestingly, one of the judges was a woman. Her name was Devorah. We spoke last week about the song of Devorah. Devorah's song, Devorah was the judge, which means the ruler, the king, the sovereign of the Jews at that time. And it's very interesting. You know, this is not like, you know, the emancipated 20th century. This is thousands of years ago. And this isn't like because your father was the king and, you know, this didn't happen by virtue of any lineal or paternal or anything like that. There's no familial rules here. It's who was that greatest Jew that is supposed to be leading and greatest Torah scholar. And at this time in Israel, it was a woman. And her name was Devorah. And actually, she had the longest, I believe, or if not the longest, one of the longest, I think it was the longest reign of any of the judges. She was a judge for 40 years. It was very unusual in those days to last that long as a judge. It just was a very chaotic time and people didn't live as long. She was a judge for 40 years, and more unusual than the length of the fact that she was a judge is that, and those were 40 peaceful years. This was, again, a very hard time for the Jews, a lot of attacks by all the countries around them. And her reign starts off with this big war. Then she sings a song of praise to God. That's the song, that's the Haftarah. But after that, under her, the Jews enjoy 40 years of peace, unheard of in those days. And the Rebbe says, you know why? Because it was a woman leading them. And again, women are the redemptive force. So if a woman's the leader and she spiritually led this war, physically, a man was a general. Spiritually, she led the war. Her redemption, what she brought to the Jewish people, lasted 40 years. Now, what was so special about her that she became the judge of the Jewish people? I mean, pretty unusual feat for those days or even today. So our sages say what was unusual about her were 2 commandments that she was very, very meticulous about. And those 2 commandments gave her the merit to lead the Jews and to lead them so successfully that they had this reign, this respite of 40 peaceful years under her. So what was her, what were her mitzvahs? The mitzvahs of women. One mitzvah was, connected to her, was lighting the candles of the Shabbos. Now, her forte wasn't lighting the Shabbos candles, but it's symbolic of that. What she would do before she was the judge is that she would make wicks. So she would make wicks and she would dedicate these wicks. She would donate these wicks to the tabernacle. At that time, there still wasn't the temple, but they still had the tabernacle. And they used these wicks for the menorah, for lighting the lights in the tabernacle. And because she dedicated herself to making these wicks that illuminated God's home, the true light is a light of Torah. So she was able to be this beacon of Torah's light for the Jewish people. So again, it just links in our world, we call it lighting the Shabbos candles as this special, special, special privilege, merit, a responsibility that we have that really creates illumination in the world. There was something else also that was very special about her. And that was, surprisingly enough, her modesty. Now, why do I say surprising? I mean, she's a righteous woman. She probably was modest. All righteous women are modest, right? True, but she was very out there. I mean, again, let's go back a few thousand years. She was incredibly out there. Even go back 100 years. She was incredibly out there. She was the leader of the Jews. She was the judge of the Jews. She was really the mastermind of the war of the Jews. She then led them for 40 years. And what was her forte? She was so modest. So how do we see this expressed? So one thing about her, just that expresses how truly modest she was. Again, going totally beyond the law. The law didn't demand this. But when she would judge the people, primarily she's judging men. And very often there's not too many people there. And in a case, says she would never judge inside her house. Again, as I mentioned with the Rebbe and the idea of yichud, a woman being alone with a man. Now, in those days, those laws had not been written yet, so to speak. So legally, she was allowed to be alone with a man, let alone judge, where obviously she wasn't the only one there. It wasn't her and a man. It was more than one man there. But still, so it wasn't a legal obligation. It was a sensitivity. She had a sensitivity to modesty that had nothing to do with the law, that was much deeper than the demands of the laws. And as such, she felt it inappropriate. This woman who's so out there and has no problem listening to these men and determining the law and teaching them the law and teaching them Torah. And at the same time, she's so modest, but she's not going to be doing this in her home because that's too secluded. So she's going to be outside. Now, again, she's in Israel. It's quite hot. So you'd think, okay, if she's going to be outside, she'll be under some nice leafy tree. At least she'll get a little shade. And the men come and go, but she's there all day judging. No. When she would judge, she would sit under a palm tree. And that's why till today, we call these palm trees Tomar Devorah. If you've ever heard the term in Hebrew, Tomar Devorah literally means Devorah's palm trees. Because Devorah, this judge of thousands of years ago, she would only sit under a palm tree. Why? Because there's no shade. Because it's really tall and there's just a few leaves on top. So there's no shade underneath. Because not only did she not want to be in her house with these men, she didn't even want to be under a leafy tree with these men that could provide her some protection from the sun. She wanted where there should be like really no shade. So there shouldn't be any intimation of seclusion as she's judging the men. And that's such a level of, again, the law doesn't require it. The law at that time totally didn't, she could have been in her home. And if you're outside, you can be under any tree you want. And she wasn't even alone with one man. And still she had such a sensitivity to modesty, which didn't preclude her being out there and the judge of the Jewish people, the judge and leader of the Jewish people. And I thought it's such a beautiful model for us. I was emphasizing this because though we don't usually talk that much about modesty in this class, I know we did at one point have a series on the idea of covering your hair with a wig, but it's really a very fundamental aspect of a woman, of a Jewish woman, is modesty. And sometimes people think of modesty as like, oh, modesty means like, you're sequestered at home and aren't supposed to do anything. So here's this woman who was the leader of her people, not only a political leader, a Torah leader of her people, and yet is given as an exemplary example, as an exemplar of modesty. And it's something to think about in terms of ourselves, this idea of what does real modesty mean, and how do each one of us really do it? Any thoughts on that? We're talking here about these two commandments. The commandment of lighting the Shabbos candles, as we're saying, Devorah was very special in making these wicks herself to donate them to the tabernacle, and an extreme high level of modesty. Anyone want to talk about how they relate to either or both of these mitzvahs, both of these commandments, both of these ways God wants us as Jewish women to serve him? Well, we'll do it one at a time. Maybe two is too broad. Shabbos candles. Anyone have any things they want to share on what does it mean to them when they light the Shabbos candles, or do they feel that power or not when they're lighting the Shabbos candles and bringing Shabbos into their house?
Well, as I said before, like I'm rushing for everything. Even if I have like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes before Shabbos and I'm done everything, it still has like this chaotic feel in my house. And I feel like even my kids feel it, so that when I light Shabbos candles, like they come to me and they're like, "I'll like, good Shabbos, mommy," and like I kiss them on their forehead, and like after I'm done lighting, I kiss them on their forehead. So they started doing that too, and like it brings like this like relaxation. I feel like right like we light Shabbos candles and like it's like calming. Like the house isn't, I don't know, for me at least. And I feel like
from
they
being
feel
on
this way too.
wheels to being more
like, okay, we can breathe.
We can breathe. Shabbos came in. We did it. One more
Yeah,
week. We did it.
Exactly. And like it's like a happiness. Like the kids love Shabbos. Like we always talk about how Shabbos is coming, which my daughter hears me. But like it's exciting. Like even yesterday my daughter was like, we're driving and she goes, "It's Shabbos tonight again, right?" And I'm like, no.
Soon, in just a few more days.
Exactly. So yeah,
Very
it's
sweet.
definitely like a nice time.
I think all children have that sense. So, I mean, all my children are a Dove Bear, till now. I like this. He also has to like light the Shabbos candles with me, of course. Very important. And then he's like, "Good Shabbos, mommy." He gives me a big hug.
It's so cute.
Yes.
I mean, like even my 2-year-old, she's like, "I want to light Shabbos candles." So like, I don't give her own candle, but I'm like, "Okay, hold mommy's hand as I light mine,"
Very sweet.
and she feels
If
very
you feel she's
special, and like she
capable
does
of
the
it, you
hands.
could give her her own candle too, old enough, if she's old enough, if you think she's ready.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Yeah, because she like sees, my 3-year-old doing it, and she loves it. And
It's good to wait till a holiday and start by the holiday. So maybe by Pesach.
oh, that's a nice one. Yeah, that's a good idea. She's ready. No, she loves it. She like cries if I light without her being next to me. So
That's so sweet.
yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else want to share their feelings? What happens by them when they light the Shabbos candles? What about tznius, modesty? We don't talk that. We've had, like I'd say, we had a few classes on modesty, not too many though. But anyone has any relationship to that as a Jewish woman, their sense of modesty? I know Rivka shared with us her very powerful story of how she started covering her hair. That was an amazing testimony to the sensitivity of a Jewish woman and modesty. Very, very, very powerful. But anyone have something to share about their relationship to that aspect of being a Jewish woman? Anything they try to do differently because of that? Or if they are dressing more modestly, how that impacts them and makes them feel?
May I? I started lighting candles many years ago, and it gives me the feeling of connection. Not originally, it wasn't connection to God. It wasn't connection to my Judaism. It was mostly the connection to my grandparents. I just realized that they were doing that, and then it was interrupted for a couple generations, and I resumed to do that. It was the first aspect. Even now, when I'm doing lighting Shabbat candles, I say all my words, and then I'm talking about my personal feelings, mentioning my great grandparents whom I have never been known. And another thing, I started wearing skirts on Shabbat, and it was a
Wow,
big changes for me.
that's a big commitment.
It is very convenient to wear pants here in America. Unfortunately, it's easy.
In Russia, women didn't wear pants?
No, we were wearing pants, but not in 80s. It was more in beginning of 90s, I would say. But
By
here,
us, we did not wear pants in Georgia.
No, women wore skirts.
Georgia, I would say more religious country.
Yeah. More Eastern country. Yeah.
Yeah. I always been city girl, so as soon as it was allowed to wear pants, and especially when we moved in here, I couldn't afford to buy anything. Everything I was getting was like pants. Skirts now, something I'm wearing on Shabbat for sure. And I try to change it for the rest of the week, but not successful with it yet.
I love the idea. So I want to comment on both things that Orly said. First, Orly said how when she originally started lighting the Shabbat candles, she next to her great-grandmother, great-grandparents, great-grandmother. And I always feel that. And if I'm talking to someone about lighting the candles, I always exactly feel that. Like there's an unbroken chain since Sarah, since our matriarchs, Jewish women lit the Shabbat candles. And if you don't remember your mother doing it, or you don't remember your grandmother doing it, I'm sure your great grandmother did it. Like, otherwise you probably wouldn't know you're Jewish today. And it really, really is this picking up this chain that lasted over thousands of years. And just there's a few little loops at the end that somehow broke, and just reattaching to that very, very strong chain. So I always did have that feeling, and it was nice to hear Orly echoing it. And I love that commitment of, I know skirts are more modest and pants are more functional or comfortable or affordable or all of the above, but I know skirts are more modest. So at least on the Shabbat, I'm going to wear the skirts. I think that's beautiful because that's like a real major step. Anyone else here has done that, like made that commitment from pants to skirts and what it felt like?
No. It's convenient. Actually, I like to wear pants skirt, which like is you can seems like it's skirt, but it's like pants skirt. Yeah.
You want the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but I have few. I'm buying. I'm buying this kind of. I like it.
So it feels a little more modest because it's not really pants. It's pants, but also the
Yeah.
skirt element.
Mhm.
Great,
Yeah.
great. It's nice you like it.
Convenient, yeah. Mhm.
Amazing. Anyone else? Went from wearing pants to skirts or something, like Orly saying on the Shabbos, like Bella saying, a pants skirt. This move is not pants, it's a pants skirt. So we're moving in the right direction. Anyone else has something to share about that? What Orly started us off?
Um, yeah, I started wearing pants, skirts when I got married. And I don't know, I don't think I was ready for that. I think more my husband had this vision that women supposed to wear skirts, and that's how it happened. And for a long time, it wasn't easy. And I like to wear long skirts. And let's say every time I go to the airport and schlepping the luggage, and I'm in long skirt, and I always like feel, I'm like, people look at me
Tripping
strange.
along. Yeah.
Yeah, like what's wrong with this woman? And it's been years. I felt that very strongly, and I think they treat me differently when I go through security. They always try to see what I'm hiding under that long skirt. And I don't know. And over time, it just became natural, and just now I'm like almost don't remember how it feels to wear pants.
So that's interesting what Chava was saying, because it wasn't like, she didn't say it wasn't even something she thought about. It was like her husband wanted it. And being the awesome woman, knowing that you're supposed to say yes, she said, of course I could give up pants, like for you, no problem. And, but it really, it wasn't what she was interested in. And it felt like strange. So Chava, did at a certain point you feel either like you started appreciating that you're wearing skirts, or was there a point where you felt that because you were wearing skirts, you felt it was making you more modest? You felt that you were more modest, or something in you shifted as you were wearing skirts and not pants?
I don't know, it's hard to say that, because originally I didn't understand the concept. How the skirt is more modest than pants, right? I didn't see it. But now, now for some time already, I see it. And I do appreciate it, because like I see how it's not modest, and I'm glad I'm not, I guess, I don't have that challenge. I don't need to wear that. I don't know how to explain it. Now I see it very clearly, and I'm just like.
I totally understand what you're saying. Chava's saying when she was wearing pants, if anyone would have felt her they were modest, she'd be like, what are you talking about? My pants are so much more modest than your skirt. My pants are covering my whole leg. I mean, like, what are you talking about? I could see your calf and, you know, like whatever. I don't think your skirt's modest either at all. And only after wearing the skirts for a while, she's saying, did her eyesight actually shift, and she really can see why skirts were modest. I had actually a very similar experience myself, not in pants. I was raised religious. I never wore pants in my life, but I will share something that happened to me that I really, really exactly experienced what Chava's saying. When I was growing up, if you're wearing a skirt, according to Jewish law, the skirt has to cover your knee. It has to cover your knee in every position. If you're sitting, if you're standing, if you're going upstairs, if you're getting into a car. So it can't just be like right over the edge of your knee, because that's not going to work either. It has to be a little bit more than that. Okay, fine. That's a modest skirt. Now, in fashion, which could be also comfort or style or both, they start making slits in skirts. Now, if you have a slit in the skirt covers your knee, but the slit goes halfway up your leg or even a bit above your knee or even just above your knee. Well, that's not allowed, because with the slit, you can see the leg that's supposed to be covered by the skirt. So people have different things. People, if it was me, I pin up the slit, which isn't very practical, or you sew up the slit, or you make a kick pleat, which is the easiest and the best thing to do, whatever. But you have to do something to fix that skirt, because you can't, if you're being completely modest, not only do your knees have to be covered by the skirt, but you can't have a slit. But then, as fashions evolve, there started to be longer skirts, like Chava's saying, longer skirts were in style, and they would have slits, but the slits ended before the knee. So it's a long skirt that goes halfway, you know, till who knows where, and it has a slit, and the slit's definitely way below your knee. So I, as a girl, had no problem wearing those things. Like, why not? I don't even need a skirt there. My knees totally covered, sitting, standing, walking, jumping, no issue. And that's how I continued. At a certain point, this is already, I was married, I was in Chicago. I remember sort of peripherally hearing that rabbis were saying you couldn't wear those skirts, or you had to close those slits as well. However you close a slit, you sew it up, you pin it up, you put in a kick pleat, like you can't wear, you can't wear it with a slit, even though it's below the knee. And I remember, like, I'm a very sincere person. I'm very sincere in my relationship to God, and I try to be modest, and I couldn't understand it. You know, I'm thinking, you know, my rational reasoning brain, logical brain is trying to compute this. I'm like, I don't need a skirt there. You know, there's no requirement to have a skirt at that point. Sorry, I just see my computer stuff. There's no, thus means my computer's about to die. Save the day, hopefully. Okay, sorry. My computer was unplugged and I didn't realize. I don't need a slit. I don't need a skirt there. My skirt could end at that point. It's way below my knee. What's the problem with the slit? So I heard it, but I just couldn't believe it, so to speak. It didn't make any sense to me. And then I started looking into it, and I was like, no, it's the real deal. Rabbis are really coming out and they're writing legally that you're not allowed to wear such a skirt. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, but all right. Since when does my brain have anything to do with it? If this is what the law is, this is the law. So I took all those skirts and I sewed them up, pinned them up. I closed every slit. Fine. It took me I give it 3 weeks. It took me about 3 weeks later for me to look at such a skirt with a slit in it below the knee and be like, oh, now I understand why it's not modest. And it was such a strong sensation. It's literally like what Chava was saying. She was saying in her situation, I was in mine, but it was a very similar feeling of like, I was very sincerely trying to understand the problem. And I couldn't see a problem. And my brain kept going the same circle. I don't need to wear a skirt there. I could cut my skirt there and it's fine. Why can't I have a slit there? I'm allowed to show that part of my leg. Like, what's the deal? What's the problem? Doesn't make any sense. And so I literally could not see anything immodest about it. Like on any level, I didn't even understand it. I didn't even originally think the rabbi said it. I thought people just, talk. And then only when I really looked into it and saw, no, the rabbis are really saying you're not allowed to do this. I'm like, okay, I don't get it, but I'm listening. And then like, it took like 3 weeks. And then I could look at such a skirt and see like the, I guess what I'll call the peekaboo effect. And like suddenly I can be like, oh, now you see it, now you don't. It's actually not really so modest. You just see your leg, it's not so enticing, but now you see it, now you don't. I could understand the immodesty of it and I could really sense it. And I could not one drop as long as I was wearing them. And I was very sincerely trying to understand the problem and I really couldn't get it. And once I stopped wearing them, about 3 weeks later, I got it completely. So there's really something that happens to us as we stop doing something, but I think also as we dress in a certain way, or modesty, of course, is not only in dress, it can also be in the language you use, in the things you allow yourself to read or watch, and in any arena, as we put on ourselves the garment of modesty, it changes us and makes us more modest. I'm actually thinking now, I wasn't planning on going to this at all, but hopefully someone here needs to hear this. And for the rest of you, I hope it's enjoyable also. I was just thinking now of a Hasidic discourse that I learned that made a very big impact on me. And the Hasidic discourse is basically explaining that, as we might say in English, the mask makes the man. You know, if a person is not such a nice person, but they act like a nice person consistently for a long time, that mask they're wearing changes them and actually makes them a nicer person. And that's a human fact, but in Hasidus, it's explained spiritually, Kabbalistically, that this is actually a divine truth. And that the garments you wear, that's how it's explained, they're garments of speech, garments of thought, garments of deed. The garments you wear impact and change the wearer. The way this affected me very strongly personally was, it was saying by the same token that if someone's not so smart, but they constantly say very smart words, it actually changes them and makes them literally smarter. Literally their mind works better. And I was like, oh, because my son Doper, who of course, as you all know, has Down syndrome, and he's, thank God, a very smart boy with Down syndrome. And after I was learning this, I wondered it's because I always have him repeat words of Torah. I mean, what's smarter, what's wiser than the Torah? And every day he says these words of Torah every single day. And it's difficult to get him to say them, but I say it with him every single day. And I was wondering if that garment of wisdom that he's wearing every single day was what was helping his mind develop. So similarly, I'm thinking now as we're discussing this, obviously, as we wear literal garments, if literally our clothing or our garments of speech and our refined speech or our garments of thought and what we allow our eyes to see and our mind to think, if we're dressing ourselves in more refined clothing, it impacts inward and we change. And our perception changes. And that's why literally something that didn't seem a problem, we actually understand why it's a problem. Anyone else has had some experience in this vein, in changing their dress or attempting to or striving to and seeing their experiences with it?
Yes, definitely. Like when I started becoming religious, I like took on tznius.
Are you talking now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Very, very softly, like in and out.
Oh, okay.
Now it's a little better.
When I became religious, like, and I started keeping things, I think that was like one of the first things I started keeping, but like very.
Oh, now it's clear.
Like, oh, you can hear me better? Good. So like wearing skirts, like I picked it up pretty quickly, but it wasn't even like tznius skirts. Like first it started off like almost tznius, you know, like above the knee, but you know, and then like I realized I was like, hey, what am I doing? Like planning to show my kids what I'm doing, right? So I need to make sure it's what I want them to be, you know. So I started more effort. And then I got a job where I'm working in a Jewish school with Jewish girls. And I'm like wearing now what I have to be wearing, you know, full coverage, whatever. And then it feels weird if I go and put a skirt on now, you know, like when I'm not working, that's above the, not even above the knee, but like, you know, like in middle of the knee or something, like something that's not, I'm like, it's like so funny. now.
Borderline.
It's like, it like completely, like without even realizing, like, okay, I'm like making sure I'm completely covered for work. And that's like what I was thinking. And then not doing it is like, it without realizing it just happened, you know, you just become sensitized to it.
I think Rivka had an incredible story about her putting on a sheitel and then afterwards feeling so naked without it. That was a very dramatic moment. And I think from what you're saying is a more natural path, but to the same point of like feeling not properly dressed if you're not dressed absolutely modestly, which wasn't even your goal, but just somehow became you.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't think like I had like such a problem with how I dressed before, but now it's like, I'll put a shirt on that I was okay with before. That's not even like, it's not low cut, but it like feels now like I'm showing cleavage and it's not at all that, not even close, but that's what it feels like. Cause it's like,
That's exactly the same idea. As you dress modestly, you change. And then these things that you thought before were okay just don't seem so okay anymore.
yeah, it's really funny. I mean, I cover my hair for work too, and I luckily don't need to. And if I'm like in the area, like I'm more careful, but like even in general, I go to shul in the neighborhood that I live in right now. And when I go there, I cover my hair. I don't need to. They don't know my story. They don't know what's going on with me. And it feels so funny. Like this past week, we had winter vacation, and I went to like a hotel with my kids, just, you know, so we could go into a pool and swim and stuff. And it was like so amazing. No one was in the pool at all. And we went, and I felt so weird that I wasn't wearing anything on my hair either. And I don't need to. I really don't halachically need to cover my hair. Like when I'm in the area and I'm not working, I'll wear like a beanie or something to cover my hair, makes it look like I'm covering, but I'm not fully. And even that feels weird. But like this was completely like I was like, hey, I don't need, halachically, it's not a problem if I cover my hair or not. And there's no one even here. And I felt so weird. And it was just like also like a weird, like, you feel different. Like, I don't need to do this. It's not my halacha, you know, like it's not, I'm not obligated in any way to do that either. And it's just like slowly creeping up on me, I guess. And like,
Yeah, it's just like we were saying about Devorah, that when Devorah wasn't going into the house to judge, there was no law that forbade her to do that. She wasn't following any law. It was a sensitivity, an incredible sensitivity. And there's no sensitivity that says you have to sit under a palm tree and you can't sit under an oak tree. It was just a sensitivity to modesty that, like you say, sort of creeps up on you. And like, this just doesn't feel right anymore. This just doesn't feel kosher, even if technically it is kosher. It just doesn't feel kosher. That's an incredible thing.
I mean, and even though like I don't need to, I really like, my kids don't understand it, but they're learning in school that, you know, a mommy covers their hair and all these things. And I really like that my kids like know that. Like today we were at a restaurant, we went out to eat, and my daughter's playing with my hair. So I'm like, oh, you like my hair? And she goes, I like your sheitel. And like it was just funny. And like I feel like they know, like, oh, like when we went swimming, they're like, oh, mommy, like you're not wearing your sheitel to go swimming. I'm like, no, I can't wear a sheitel in the swimming pool. And like it was just funny because like I feel like they don't know that I don't need to. It's none of their business either way. But like,
So it's less confusing for them if you cover your hair.
exactly, it's so much less confusing. So yeah, I really like, yeah.
So it really helps. Wow, I did not realize what time it was. We're gonna have to stop. Okay, so we didn't speak about Shabbos, and I have the book here, but we did speak about law, so that was good. I want to repeat at the end what Orly said before, because I thought that was such a beautiful resolution for anyone looking to take a step toward modesty, but it's hard. So Orly's idea, and again, everyone can modify this, whatever works for them. She was saying, so on Shabbos, she's gonna wear skirts. She wears skirts only. And that's like that's a nice, oh, I could do that. It's just Friday night and Saturday, like not such a big deal. So in anything, it's always good. Sometimes we look at the thing and the thing is so overwhelming, so we do nothing. And if we make it into like a bite-sized piece that we can handle, we do it. And then when we're ready, we take the next bite. Like my bedroom had become a total disaster because anyone that was cleaning any of their possessions and they had something they didn't want, they dumped it in my room. So my room became just the dumping ground of everyone else in my house. And I was like, so many days, I'm like, I'm gonna clean my bedroom, I'm gonna clean my bedroom. But it was like too overwhelming. So I said, you know what? I'm not cleaning my bedroom. I'm cleaning one thing. And I walked in and I cleaned one thing. Well, which became more like 3 or 4, but whatever. And then the next time I said the same thing. I'm not cleaning my bedroom. I'm cleaning one thing. And I did that a few times and lo and behold, my bedroom got cleaned. So it's the same thing with a lot of other things in life. It's a good tip, you know? Whoa, that's a lot. It is a lot. You're not, one idea. Skirts on Shabbos or Friday night covering your hair. You like the candles, you want to cover your hair, just keep it for the rest of the night. You know, something like that, step by step by step. And then as Chava was saying, as I was saying, as Firma was saying so eloquently, with the story, of course, that as we do this, we change. We change. We change on the inside. It might be an amazing dramatic change, might be a very slow change, but we change. And then it doesn't feel right when we're not modest, which really shows us that that's really the truth of my identity. It's very interesting. Orly was saying how in Russia, they did wear pants, and Bella was saying never in Georgia. There, they did not wear pants. And as Jewish women, our real self is, of course not. Of course, no cleavage. Of course, not immodest. It's just a lot of other stuff has covered over what we really are inside. But when you dress a certain way, it's really just helping you remember what you really do feel on the inside. And when you get to that space, even though it might be more comfortable, more accessible, more economical, it really feels better when you're doing it modest, because that really is sort of part of the heart and soul of a Jewish woman. All right, we will stop at this point. Thank you so much. And we didn't finish the talk.
Yeah. Thank you.
Soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.